What's going on, guys? Today we are building the bottom end of my Civic engine. So here's my block. The first thing that we're doing is we're gapping the piston rings. Everything's ready to go back together on that now. And what we have is we have packs of rings here. You can see they're each labeled. Right now I'm currently gapping the first rings, which is right there. You can see it. And then you have your second ring and your oil rings. But I got one done, the first cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the second cylinder. So I'm just going to grab one of these rings. One thing to keep in mind is they do have some kind of label on them. So let's see if I can get this to focus. See how that one says 1 STD? I believe that means standard. These are just standard size rings. So that actually faces up. And what we're going to do is come over here and we're going to push this into the piston just a little bit. Okay, so I got that partially in there. And then you're going to take one of your new pistons upside down and push the ring in about an inch. And what I do is I just push into like this bottom ring land on the piston, and I make sure it's even all the way around the cylinder. Alright, so that's about right. That's about an inch down. And you're going to see this little gap right here. It's very tight. It's not going to be correct. But we are going to take our feeler gauge, and I'm measuring this out to 18 thousandths on this top ring. And as you can see, it doesn't fit. It's very tight, which is expected. They put extra material on there so that you can shave it off to what you need. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out of here. I'm going to need two hands, but I'm just going to grab it on both sides and kind of pull up. And then I'm going to go over to my piston ring tool and grind these down and show you how to do that. So this is a piston ring filer. You don't necessarily need this. You can use like an angle grinder or a regular file, but this is just a more precise way to do it. What you do is you take your piston ring and you push it up against these screws and kind of squeeze it together so that it's touching this diamond disc here. And then you just give it a few turns and that will grind your piston ring down. So that's probably about all we need, and I'm just going to go ahead and double check it. So I had to give it about five more cranks on that piston ring filer, but this should be about perfect now. So I'm going to go ahead and place it in. As you can see, it slides in there pretty easy. I can feel it grabbing on both sides of the feeler gauge. And that's exactly what we're looking for. So all of the top rings, I'm going to gap to 18 thousandths. So once I have these gapped, I'm going to place them in their respective spots. So first piston, second, third, fourth. This ring is going to go right here. And we're going to go ahead and do these last two rings. And then the second rings, I'm going to gap to 20 thousandths. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that now. Alright, so we got the rings all done. Now we're going to go ahead and put the bearings in here, the main bearings. I'm going to get them set in here. I already got these cleaned out with brake cleaner, so there's nothing on them. I can just set the bearings right in. And then we are going to put the bearings in the cradle for the crank, and then we're going to set the crank in here. We're going to torque everything down dry with plasti gauge on it and make sure everything looks good. All right, so here's the results of the plastic gauging. I measured it on there and on here. They're all the same. This one's a little bit tight. This one's at about 1,000th. They should be between 2,000ths and 15 10,000ths, I believe. But the rest of these are good. This one's at about 2,000ths. This one is also. This one's in between 2,000ths and 15 10,000ths, and then this one is about 2,000ths as well. You can see it a little bit better on the cap side. This is the one that's a little bit tight. These ones are all within the correct spec there. Alright, so now that we got everything measured out, I'm going to go ahead and put assembly lube on everything and get this assembled. So if we look at this piston, you can see that these cutouts, these valve cutouts, are bigger than these ones, which means this is the intake side. As you can see from the stock piston, the intake side's marked with an IN and it has the bigger cutout for the bigger valves, which means that the arrow is pointing to opposite directions on Vitara pistons. Vitara pistons, the arrow is supposed to point towards the flywheel, where on the original piston, the arrow points towards the timing belt. So the original piston would go in like this. The Vitara one is actually going to go in facing this way. The other thing to keep in mind is that we're going to put these rods on, and you have these two notches right there. Those go on the exhaust side of the piston. So that faces the exhaust side of the engine. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain the best way to go about assembling these. So, on Vitara pistons and a Honda motor, this points towards the flywheel, which means this is going to face this way, and then on the rod here, you have these notches, and they're going to go towards the exhaust side of the engine, which is this way. Well, technically the flywheel on this motor is actually that way, so they're going to be rotated, but I'm assembling them as if the flywheel is this way. So point the arrow that way, and you have the two notches right here. Those need to go towards the exhaust side of the engine. So this goes together like this. So what you need to do is just go ahead and take some assembly lube and put it in both sides of the piston right here and inside this connecting rod. And then I'm just going to set this down like this. And then just take some assembly lube and put it on the wrist pin. And just spread it around evenly on the wrist pin. Go ahead and hold your connecting rod right here and then slide the wrist pin in through the top. And then I like to put a little bit of assembly lube in here. After you've done that, you need to go ahead and install your snap rings on the end here. My snap ring pliers aren't very good, so I like to use a screwdriver and a hammer to make sure they're in place all the way. I'm going to go ahead and pop these into place. So that snap ring is in place and it's good. And now on this side, we can do the same thing. There you have it. Both snap rings in, the connecting rod is in. As you can see, we have the arrow. If it was facing the flywheel, the exhaust side would be on this side of the engine. And you can see our notches are on that side of the rod. So we're good to go. We got to put the piston rings on here. Well, we got to separate these bottoms from the connecting rods, and then put the piston rings on, and we can put the pistons into the engine. All right. So as you can see, we got this box labeled with the rings for each piston. These are just the first and second ring. I have this piston ring tool, and I already took out the second ring from this first piston spot, which is right here. We're gonna go ahead and put this on the piston right here. So to do that, we just take this piston ring tool and we put the end of the ring in the tool right there. The first thing that you want to do though is, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, there is a number right there. You see the 2, and then the STD is for standard. So that needs to face up. This is the second ring, that's what the 2 is for, and that text needs to face up. So you take your ring and you put it in the tool, and you can start spreading it a little bit. And these are pretty easy to spread. You don't necessarily need that tool, but there we go. We got one ring on now, and we'll go ahead and put the first ring on. Same thing, this has a 1 on it, and that's going to face up. Okay, so the bottom rings were pretty easy to put in. I put them in by hand. I don't believe it matters which way these oil rings go in. I will double check that, but I don't think it matters like up or down which way they face. You definitely want to window them. So all of my rings, the way I window them is the top ring I have going to this corner, the second ring I have going to this corner, one of the oil rings, the top oil ring I have going to this corner, the bottom one I have going to this corner, and then where the squiggly oil ring comes together is right here in the bottom. Now that's a little bit different than what the owner's manual tells you. What the owner's manual tells you, I think, is this corner, and then like one right here and one right here for the oil rings. They're really close to each other, and I didn't really like that. And then also it doesn't tell you what to do with the squiggly one, so I don't really think that one matters that much where that window is, because that one is touching, there is no gap. But just in case, I put it in the bottom there. And I used these little pins to help rotate the rings around to the correct spot so that I didn't move any of the other rings while I was moving, like the oil rings, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to go ahead and install this piston. This is cylinder 1. We want the arrow to be facing the flywheel. So this piston has to be turned this way, and then this notch right here we want towards the exhaust side of the engine, which is this way. So now we can go ahead and put this in. But first, before we do that, I want to oil this up. Just gonna use some good old 5W30. So I double checked the bottom oil ring thing, and it does not matter which way that center expander spacer is facing, up or down. It'll work the same both ways. Just make sure the ends aren't overlapped, which mine are not. So now I'm going to go ahead and install the piston. All right, so we got one piston in. We're gonna go ahead and put all the other ones in now. All right, so now I'm going to install, I'm going to clean out the inside of the rod here and the inside of this piece and the bearings because they did have some oil on them from the factory. So I'm going to install everything dry and plastigate it on the crank and then take it apart again, put some assembly lube on it and put it back together. Okay, so this is a lot of extra work to plastic gauge it this way. If you ever want to plastic gauge your connecting rods, what you want to do is put all the pistons in before you put the crank in, and then you can plastic gauge the rods on the crank without this girdle in place. So now I got assembly lube on both sides of the connecting rod. We're going to go ahead and install it. These get torqued to 55 foot-pounds. These are the rod bolts. And we're going to use this provided ARP fastener assembly lube to get it to the correct torque specifications. Well, the camera died while I was recording, but we got all of the connecting rods in now. We're going to go ahead and throw the oil pump on, which is pretty easy to install. So I'm just going to clean this up really quick. There's a little bit of RTV left down there from before. I tried cleaning it with the rag. It doesn't want to come off, so I'm going to use this little wheel and get it off really quick. All right, the oil pump is on. I'm just going to go ahead and thread this crank bolt in so we can turn the motor with it, because right now I can't really turn the motor. And then the next thing that we're going to do is go ahead and put on the oil pickup tube. So I have this new gasket that came with the oil pump. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that on there, and then we can just pop this guy on up here and bolt it into place. Alright, now we got the bottom end all assembled. You can see we can crank it over. Pretty nice. Alright, so all we have left to do at this point is go ahead and I need to get a new rear main seal, which I don't have right now, so I'm going to order one, as well as some more RTV. And then we can put on the rear main seal and then the oil pan, and then the bottom end is completely finished and we can start working on the head. Alright, so now I have Honda Bond on the rear main seal, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on. That's a built motor right there.
Alright, let's put it in.
Almost. Okay, so next I'm going to go ahead and just put my oil pan on. Alright, the oil pan is on now, but I'm missing two little bolts, or two little nuts, so I gotta get those. I think my other motor was missing them, so I took them off this one to put them on there, but I'll put them back on here at some point. But we're gonna go ahead and flip this over and mount the crank sensor, the crank position sensor, and what was the other thing I said? Oh, the dipstick tube. And there you have it. It's a completely built bottom end. Now all we have left to work on is the head. That's going to be it for this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. There's more videos coming soon. And thanks for watching. Peace out.